Okay, everybody, you're back here with the Sales and Marketing Alliance with Tim Kiss and myself, and we have a special guest today in Chad Learmond from Amplify Solutions. Hey, Chad.
Hey guys, pleasure to be with you today.
Welcome. Our first formal guest. This is exciting,
This
Scott.
this is kind of exciting. So, and apparently Chad hadn't. We didn't tell him this, but Chad has come with a dad joke to help kick this off. So we're gonna pass the mic to you, Chad, and we're not going to be judging you, but we're going to be judging you based
Oh,
on the
you'll be
joke.
judging me. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's fair. That's awesome. Well, being a big Winnipeg Jets fan, I took the liberty of creating a joke maybe at the expense of my Blues compatriots there. So, what do the Blues and a broken Zamboni have in common?
I have no idea.
Neither could clear the zone when it mattered.
Oh, that's
Oh,
great. The blues singing the blues. Yep, I love it.
yeah, there is so much pride for Winnipeg and the Jets right now. It's awesome. Well, that was pretty good. All right, Tim, can
That's
you
very good.
do you want to follow that one?
Well, sure. I mean, we're talking sales and marketing. We're talking predictable revenue. We're
Yeah.
talking profitable revenue. And for me, my wallet's like an onion. Every time I open it, it makes me cry.
So,
Uh, that's
so
pretty good,
because
Tim.
I'm such a nerd, I follow some Star Trek stuff, and I have a joke here from Star Trek. So, so I told a joke today on a Zoom meeting, but nobody laughed. It seems I'm not remotely funny.
That's pretty good, man. I like that one.
All
That
right.
that
And it's
joke though,
very
I get
true,
down to
too.
seven.
So if so if anybody is still listening, if they've stayed on after that,
Yeah.
we're gonna get into the good stuff. So maybe as a bit of a setup, I met Chad several months ago. We've both have a passion for profitable revenue generation, I'll put it that way. And we have this concept of how I've been describing it as a revenue generating ecosystem where there's number of moving parts that are all working together in an organization to help maximize that revenue growth. So within that context, I guess maybe the first question, I think Tim, your question may be similar, but as somebody who's coming from the technology side of this,
Hmm.
before we get into how what you do helps with this, why do you feel it's so important for there to be this alliance or this coordination between sales and marketing? Why do they need to play nicely in the sandbox?
Well, yeah, so it's a great question. So, I mean, really you're talking about two sides of the same coin. So you're talking about, really when you talk about marketing, it's like, okay, how do we generate interest? How are we going to find the people that are the right fit for our organization, will value the product or service that we have? And then once that heavy lifting that's done and is super crucial into, in 2025 is that social selling ideology is like, okay, or methodology is like, okay, we're going to go out there, we're going to create demand. That demand we're then going to bring into the sales channel. So when you have a certain type of messaging, that messaging has to be consistent. Once that handoff happens, that
Yeah.
language has to be consistent. The value proposition has to be consistent. So those two entities really need to be talking the same language, understand the value proposition, understand the customer journey, what it looks like, and then once that handoff is made, okay, we're gonna now execute on everything that we've done on the marketing side, all the promises we've made,
It
the
can't be a
messaging.
shift. It can't be
That's
a
right.
shift away.
That's right. It has to be the same thing. So then sales gets a hold of it. They qualify it, they move it through the sales process in a very defined and predictable way that matches the marketing efforts. And then the customer knows exactly what to expect. They get that consistency, they get that deliverable, and then we onboard them and bring them into the organization as a one piece of business. So to me, the relationship between sales and marketing is getting more and more critical. And the only other thing I'd add to that is, especially on the marketing side, with the amount of noise out there for the buyers, like they're really shutting down any cold calling. Like they're not responding to things. So, we really need to create an environment where they understand the value you bring as an organization, they create interest, and then they want to start a conversation.
Start a conversation. I love that wording.
Yeah. So that's really where I see that kind of hand in glove with sales and marketing. And really the the CRO, the VP of sales, CMO, whatever you want to, whatever the heads of those departments are, those two people need to be in lockstep as they develop strategy and then obviously the execution of that strategy.
Tim, I think you had a question you wanted to sort of build on that?
I was going to come at it from the flip side and say, so what happens when they're not aligned? Where are some of the challenges? But rather than do that, I'm gonna flip just a little bit differently and ask. So when we talk about making sure we understand the customer better, and
Hmm.
there's two things that came up out of your answer on that one, Chad, and one of them is yes, the buyer journey, and I think one piece and being in that all three of us are interested in the human side of it. It's understanding the emotional impact during different stages of the buyer journey. So my first question is, do you see differences and how do you see companies responding to different levels of emotional impact and awareness for the customer as they go through the buying cycle from first awareness to maybe potentially and hopefully buying from that particular company?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, we're selling to human beings. There's emotions associated with that, right? We all know we've been through that ourselves as buyers, where you're considering a major purchase. You're really humming and hawing. It's like this is a big deal. I don't want to be wrong. I have a fear of change, like every other human being on the planet. So how do you manage that emotions? And really, because right on the marketing side, they're there to create excitement about you. There's a buzz. It's like, okay, now oh, they've recognized a problem that I have. Okay, that person can help me solve that problem. You bring them in, you go through a discovery phase where it's like, okay, let's have a really strong understanding of your company, who you are, what you need, and okay, how are we going to solve for that? So that part of the process, everybody's very excited about, right? So then you move into the proposal side. And then it's like, okay, now you can see the brake pedals are hitting a little bit. Now we're getting closer to that imminent decision or change. It's like, okay, now I'm going to make sure that either as a buyer, I've really asked every question I need to have, or as a seller, if we start to see stall or we start to see hesitation, have we really gone through that discovery process in a meaningful way? Have we addressed all the concerns? Right. So we get into that proposal phase. We're dealing with that fear of change and the emotions associated with that. And that's where that continuity and that consistency comes from. It's like, okay, we've gone through the discovery process, Mr. or Mrs. Customer. You said you had these three concerns. We've addressed them. Is there any other concerns that we haven't touched on that might be making you hesitate right now? You go through that, and that's really that kind of hand holding. But again, that consistency of the process is critical then. So then you get to the close where it's like, okay, I'm feeling really good about this. If you've done everything right from the marketing and the sales process side and the execution side, really closing is an inevitability. It's like you've done everything right, and it's just as simple as like, I'm ready to go. When do we start? I love hearing that. I know I've done something very right when I get to the end of the process and the customer is or the prospect's extremely excited about getting going. So
I love that. You know what? Just a little bit
yeah,
of a sidebar.
yeah.
What you described there is so important because there's all this talk about closing out there. And
Hmm.
I believe that you just hit it on the head. If you're talking to the right people and having the right conversations, and if you properly address their concerns, the close will simply happen naturally, organically.
Yeah.
I feel like the best closing skills are doing the earlier stages of the sales process properly.
Absolutely, yeah. If you have really targeted the right people, and maybe targeted is the wrong choice of word, but you're talking to the right people that would value your product or service, that have a legitimate need that you have presented a solution for, and then you have gone through a really solid discovery process, then I find then that yes, it's just, dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little negotiation in there on price, some T's and C's, whatnot, but it's very nuanced. And then it is literally, okay, when do we start? I just had one of these last week where we went through a very, very slow and drawn out sales process, and as salespeople, that can drive us a little crazy, right? We're just like, hurry up and make a decision, but what experience has taught me is like, okay, well, that's all right. So when we got to the end, the customer said to me, it's like, okay, Chad, thank you for being so patient. You've really addressed all our concerns and then some. And me and my father, we are anxious and ready to go. Can you get the agreement over as soon as possible? And can we start on May 1? And then I'm in my head going, all of that hard work through the selling process was worth it. And then you're going to talk about customer retention too, because now you have the right person that values a product or service. And the reality of it is, if you do a good job of execution, even a good job of execution, you're going to keep that customer for life likely.
Well,
So this is
it's interesting too because you use T and C as terms and conditions, and yes, that's part of it. I flip it around and I say C and T, confidence and trust. So
Yes, yeah.
first of all, there has to be confidence and trust between sales and marketing. Certainly, you're going to have any confidence and trust between the organizations, but to your earlier point, it's not an organizational decision, it's a personal buying decision that happens with somebody representing the organization and somebody representing the selling
pe
organization.
people again.
It's back
Yes.
to people. I keep in one of the classes that I teach, I always stroke out B2C and B2B and I put P2P because it's person to person.
Yeah.
And I like the way you've explained that there too, because somebody's going through the process and it depends on so many factors to how you build that confidence and trust. I'll steal from Charlie Green's famous book, Trust-Based Selling, but it is about pulling that together so
Mhm.
that at some point the customer goes, not only do you understand my problem, which is a marketing issue initially,
Mhm.
marketing needs to find that out, to feed it into sales, to say, and here's how we link our solution to the problem.
Yeah,
Because the customer goes, I know what my problem is. I just don't know what solution I should use.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where you come in and that's where you help.
Absolutely. And there has to be, and you nailed it on the trust side. And Tim is, or excuse me, Scott has heard me say this word a lot, intent.
Yep.
As people's ability to pick up poor intent is unbelievable. They know immediately when that your intent is poor. And when you come with great intent, you're trying to help people, help solve problems. Even if you didn't get your solution not 100% of the way there, there's still like that little bit of like, okay, well, I think they've addressed just about everything. I got a couple little things I guess we're just gonna have to try. But when the trust is built, right, and the intent is good, then it's like, okay, that's not a problem. I know that we can work together to solve these challenges. And in our business in the CRM game, we've developed a system called Launchpad, but that takes them 80% of the way there. And then there's a lot of trust that has to be built through that discovery process, through building trust with the customer to say, okay, we can customize this last 20% and take you all the way to where you go. But there's no way for me to show that to people, and we have to build the trust and make them understand our competency and our development expertise to say, no, we've done it with others, we can do it with you.
So there's a couple things there. So Larry Levine, I'll shamelessly name drop, he talks about commission breath, right?
Mm,
And that's where the intent isn't pure. The intent is to try to sell somebody something. So
yes.
I love that idea. So this intent or commission breath is so important. Now, again, this is the Sales and Marketing Alliance, and we're talking about how sales and marketing work together to help organizations drive revenue. And Chad, you've alluded to, the technology side of it. And, for the millions of people who are watching, Chad sent us over some key points in terms of how a CRM can help an organization. And I won't get into the details of what you shared, but the one of them is about around reporting and analytics.
Hmm.
So, again, from this sales and marketing alliance perspective,
Hmm.
how do these reports and how do these insights actually help teams to sell more?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question and use a real world example from my previous life. So,
Okay.
um, really, CRMs are about data. That's what they're about. They're about creating a very simple tool that people view as a sales enablement tool, but provides the data to be able to make great insights about prospects, about leads, about to marketing, to then ultimately one business and existing customers. So, I guess I'll start with marketing. So you go out, you have a marketing spend, you have a marketing strategy. You're going out and investing in certain areas, but you don't really know. You have no way of tracking what is actually working and it isn't, right? So you come and say, okay, we spent $100,000 on LinkedIn, we decided to do Facebook ads, we did a direct mail push, whatever we want, blog posts, kind of go down the list. But what is actually netting us results, right? And that's where that trackability comes in of connecting marketing into our CRM to say, okay, what is the lead source? We're going to track that. We're going to then roll up reporting on that. So when we're evaluating our ad spend every 30 days, we're like, yeah, this is what's working and this is what isn't. And then it can also map to the customer journey. It's like, okay, well, not only is LinkedIn working as an example, but when we go through the selling process, we are converting on 80% of those warm leads. Versus if we're coming through Facebook, we have the same amount of qualified leads, but we're only winning 40% of those deals. So you really want to track investment to one business and repeat business, and that's really the only way to do it. The other thing from a reporting perspective, not tying quite into marketing, but when you think about managing existing business, is I used to run into a scenario in trucking all the time where you would get a total territory revenue number. And it's like, okay, this year I need to do $10 million. And you're 3 months through the year and everything's looking good. You're 5% over revenue numbers. And then in month five, you realize that, oh my, like my second biggest customer is down 90%, but that was hidden in the overall number. And now I have no way of going. I look like a fool because I didn't know that I had lost this business for 4 or 5 months. Nobody in the organization showed me as well. So it gives you the data points to say, okay, uh, what is working for the marketing to one business side, once I win that piece of business, how do I analyze what is working and what isn't? So I think that reporting side for me at the rep level, which is really important around user adoption, you can allow the rep to make very insightful decisions, strategic decisions about where they're going to spend their time and the types of efforts they're going to put in.
So before Tim gets to ask his follow-up question, so there's two things. If the people stuck around after the dad jokes, the second piece that I think people could question us on, and this is where I'm going to segue to Tim, is that there are salespeople out there saying, "What, marketing passes us good leads? Since when does that happen?" So,
Oh
so
yeah,
Tim,
it's the Glenn
the
Gary or
Gary
Glenn
leads, yeah.
Ross leads. Yeah, you want the Glenn Gary ones.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing on this one, Chad, is um, I am a big believer as a marketer that you need the data, you need to look at it. But I've also, and this gets back to our earlier comment about how the three of us are interested in the human aspect,
Yes.
I'm really fascinated by the activities that the individual customers take and the result that creates the data that we can analyze. So I
Mhm.
love that when you said, and the reps have an ability to look on an individual basis and see what's happening with each customer. That sort of insight is huge. For me, the sales and marketing piece needs to come together to say, okay, what's actually happening versus what we wanted to try and make happen.
Mhm.
What changes or adjustments do we need to make? So my question for you is, at that next level of action after the data,
Mhm.
what do you see as either the biggest opportunity or the biggest challenge that organizations may have with that good data that's being now provided to them?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind immediately on the action after the data is one is okay to Scott's point, it's like okay, so we came in with this plan. My old boss had a great saying. He goes, "There's a battle plan and there's battle." Right? So we come in, we have our battle plan, we get into battle, then there's adjustments. So we thought that our ICP, our ideal customer profile, was X. We thought that we're really going to resonate in this vertical. We thought that we're going to resonate with this title. Well, actually, after we look at the data after a year of measuring leads through one customers, that's not the case at all. We actually are resonating way more in manufacturing than we are maybe in equipment sales. We're resonating way more with CFOs, ironically, than CROs. We now say, okay, we're gonna now make that pivot, and our ICP doesn't look like we thought it was, so we're gonna make that adjustment. So now you have that 360 cycle of going back into and adjusting the marketing plan. And you can't do that without that data, without that
Yeah.
throughput, right? So that one is huge. And the other question you had, Tim, was what is the negative impact of that? Or
Yeah, if you don't do that, what do you see or what have you seen as some of the fallout, the negative fallout, if you don't take some action on what you're getting from your data?
Yeah, so if you don't do that, and this is like the old definition of insanity, right? So you probably know what I'm going to do. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So now, when you're not getting the conversion rates you want, you're not winning business, you don't have any data to go back and say what is working and what isn't. And when we talk about CRM, user adoption is a huge one. Sales reps look very skeptically at CRM, and rightfully so. I was one of those guys back in 2001.
That's one of my questions. That's a question coming up.
Yeah, sorry, Scott.
That's okay.
Back in 2001, we were mandated to use this Oracle CRM. It took me 20 minutes in dial up, and now I'm aging myself, just to enter a call note. I was expected to do 50 call notes, 50 calls a week. So just do the math on that, just to put the notes in the system. And that was supposed to be done after hours. Well, they lost the entire sales force. Nobody was doing it at all, right? So now we go back as a sales enablement tool and a data tool. And then and we look at it and say, okay, how can we use the data to truly help the rep and marketing be effective? So, when I was in sales leadership in a couple of my previous roles, what I would do with my sales teams is say, hey, listen, we're going to agree on KPIs. We're going to send you out a report automated every Monday morning. You're going to get it. You're going to analyze it. You're going to come to the meeting with your observations about what's working, what isn't. We're going to now work on solutions together to solve problems, not just a micromanagement. Hey Bob, you didn't do your 46 calls last week. It's all metrics based, right? Which every person loves that meeting. It's
Love them.
like, yeah, exactly. So, and then you generally lose your high performers first. The rule. Yeah, I know they're like, no, I'm not, like, I'm out. But you come in a really collaborative way as a sales leader to say, okay, how do we solve this problem together? And that problem might be marketing. That might be that we're just talking to the wrong people on the front side. Or it might be, you know what, Bob, your discovery calls go really well, but when we get to proposals, something like your conversion rates are dropping majorly. And now let's go either on some joint calls together, let's look at some of your Teams or Zoom calls together, and let's do that with a lens of trying to sharpen the saw, trying to make you better at what you do. So you're actually looking at the data. The data doesn't lie when it's accurately in there. And it's like, okay, now we can identify what the problem is and to develop strategies with our teams, with our departments to fix for that problem.
Interesting. You kind of
And
touched
a
on
nice
sales
job
leadership and
getting in
sales
one of
coaching.
Stephen.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say, nice job working in one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits. Sharpen the saw. Well done.
I love that book. I think that book is required reading for my team's day one. Yeah,
Yep, I believe it.
that is
So
foundation.
you touched on something else there too, Chad, which I think is really critical. So it's great that the salespeople can get the reports and find out what's happening on a individual basis, and then the sales leadership can manage their individual reps. I think it's also critical. Six organizations. This is something Scott and I have talked about. Marketing needs to see those reports and understand, because if there's gaps, if
Hmm.
somebody says, why did this happen or why is this happening? Sales isn't always necessarily best equipped to try and figure out some of those other reasons,
Yeah.
especially if they're broader, I'll call them external things.
Mhm.
So it's up to marketing to keep looking at what's happening in our operating environment on a regular basis. What's happening from a pestle, political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. What are
Mhm.
some of the factors that could be coming in that might impact the rep's ability to get the meeting, the rep's
Mhm.
ability to speed things up or slow things down, the rep's ability to garner credibility and trust with the potential customers? What is marketing using as the right kinds of words to establish that? So I guess my question coming out of that is this something that you see happening, or is it something that you believe should be happening more with marketing getting involved in some of that analysis so that they can say, yes, this is what we're doing is working to generate the right leads and right things, or at least you're feeding in and marketing then has the role to make adjustments as necessary.
Yeah, I sadly see not enough of that. I don't know what you gentlemen see, but there like there's some overused words in the management consulting business. Silos and paradigms are two of them, but departments are very siloed, and
Yep.
some of the most effective teams I've seen are those cross-functional teams where you get the leaders of these areas into meetings together, like the head of sales, head of operations, head of marketing, and you say, okay, like what are we trying to solve for? Our reps are doing all the right things, but our messaging is falling on dead ears. Or we get a customer, operationally, we can't keep them because they're not a good fit. They don't really match what we're trying to do. So I think that's so critical, that feedback loop, and that's where the data comes in to say, okay, this is okay. I can say how I feel, but the data shows us X. So when we start with the data, then we can start to develop opinions and start to like critically think through the problems we're trying to solve for. Like I've had this conversation in the C-suite in other organizations I've been in. It's like, really, we don't really have a defined value proposition. Like we say we do X, we don't, or we come to the market with a very broad statement that everybody says. So our messaging is getting lost at the marketing level. Nobody's really buying any of it. So that's a problem, right? So we've got to solve for that. And that requires a lot of work in the background to get an actual value proposition, to get a uniqueness that we can take to market. So that I agree with you. I think that really helps being able to again laser focus in on what is the actual problem to growth. Like if we have a challenge, what is it?
Yeah. And
So,
and I just one of the things that I do is I'll take different value propositions, mission statements, etc. Take the company name out. If you can take your company name out of your statements and insert your competitor and there's no difference, you've got a positioning problem.
I love that. I'm going to steal that one. A,
Please, please.
a very quick story, very quick, but I was interviewing for a VP role and I had to come in and present to a board on how I was going to grow their business. And I said, so I went and I looked at all their competitors and every single one of them on their website, including the company I was interviewing for, all they said was, we have the best service, we have the best quality. So I did that
yep.
exact thing. I removed it. I threw that out to everybody on the table, and everyone. I said, so somebody tell me which one is which, and
Um,
none of them could. And the investment banker from Toronto just started laughing out loud. He goes, this is our guy. And and I laughed. I said, well, it might be a little early for that determination because I hadn't even really presented yet. I said, but to me, that is step one. Like, how are we going to differentiate ourselves? And I love that you do that. I wish more organizations would be like ruthless with what makes them different or unique and why people are going to buy from them.
Well, this is getting to probably another one because
Yeah.
Scott and I have talked about this a fair bit, and it's sort of what are the reasons that companies don't do these types of things, and fear and ego tend to come in a lot with
Hmm.
leadership,
not necessarily in that order.
and not necessarily in that order. And that's where I think one of the things that, the three of us as service providers, yes, okay, we want to be successful.
Sure.
However, we go into things trying to assist companies so that they can be successful. And by that definition, we become successful. And it's building that confidence and trust to allay those fears that certain leaders have about something. And that's what every salesperson does when they get into a selling situation.
Mhm.
They've got to allay those fears about why should I pick me over someone else?
Mhm.
Calm them down, still the waters, all those types of things. And from my perspective, too, marketing needs to understand that frontline situation from sales. And I don't think often enough, to your point earlier, marketing and sales gets together enough. Marketing needs to go on some sales calls and just listen and observe.
It's amazing how often I hear this, and Chad already talked about silos. And I feel like even though I'm almost 59 years old, so I'm
Mhm.
older than Chad, but not nearly as old as Tim, um,
Correct.
I hear this all the time. So here, you know what? So I actually have two more questions I'm not going to have time for, and for some strange reason, I'm the one that's sort of managing the time here, which is a huge mistake. So what I'm going to do to try to keep us around that half hour mark is you talked about, automation as one of the key things, customization and automation. And there's
Hmm.
this whole notion of repetitive tasks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine my repetitive task question from a
Hmm.
sales perspective and combine it with my last one, which I alluded to earlier, which is we all know that lots of salespeople are reluctant
Hmm.
to work in a CRM for a bunch of reasons.
Hmm.
And I can't help but think that there's a couple key areas where like, salespeople hate doing administrative things, they hate doing repetitive tasks, but they also hate using a CRM. So,
Hmm.
what would be your, and I don't want to cram this into a tight time frame, but if you were to try to succinctly answer that question in terms of why should a salesperson be using a CRM and they also want to make the best use of your time for automation and whatnot, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I'd say that you need to find a solution that does have robust customization and automation ability. Because to your point, to win people over, it's like salespeople hate admin. I've never met a salesperson that wakes up Monday morning and goes, "Yes, administration, let's knock off 4 hours."
If they are, they're in the wrong business
Yeah,
again,
they are
right?
clearly an accountant that is in sales, like or an engineer. And maybe that person can be successful, but very, very few salespeople have that personality profile.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, and you talk about silos too. So one of the things we do is we develop a CRM team when we come in. So that is leadership. That's going to be somebody's a power user, and we want all the voices. And the user voice is extremely important to us, right? It's like, okay, this is all great if we're sitting here in the Crystal Palace and waxing poetic about what sales want, which happens probably too much even these days. But you, Bob, as a power user, like, what are you seeing? Like, where can we make the biggest impact? It's like, you know what, Chad, I'd love to be able to automate. I'd love to have some automation around when a client calls into customer service and there's an issue. So I want, I'm going to use AI to track, okay, that as a negative sentiment, there's going to be an automated email right to me, right to my inbox. It's like, oh, wow, I now have visibility because CRM is a ton of visibility to me with the rep. It's like, I want to see all of the interactions of the organizations that are customer facing. So I know how to develop strategy. I know what I'm dealing with. And then we can get into some other automations around, okay, I want these certain emails to go out at a certain time. I want to automate these reports to come in me to give me that data. I don't have to go look for that information. AI is amazing on the meeting summary side. We're just in final stages now of um, uh, using an AI meeting summary tool to going to do that. But then it's also going to take all the notes, all of the tasks, and auto-populate it to the counter opportunity. So you don't have to do any data entry post meeting. You can do it on the road as well. So, this isn't Grandpa's CRM anymore, right? This is, and
But see,
like, and me being the grandpa probably coming back to 2001, but the amount of technology and automation available at the rep for you to be able to drastically reduce your admin time, think strategically, do the things you love to do about selling, which is developing relationships.
there it is, right?
Developing that trust and credibility has gone from now 90% of my selling time is doing that. And 10% is admin versus 40/60. And if you extrapolate that over, a annual selling cycle over years, I mean, it has a massive impact.
Yeah. So what I would say, and again, as someone who's worked with several CRMs, good ones and not so good ones, I think you just nailed it. Is that salespeople don't like admin. They
Mhm.
want to spend their time in front of prospective customers.
Mhm.
And so those two things mean you need to have some kind of technology tool to help you do more of the right things in the same amount or less time. So
Yeah.
like to me that's super powerful, and I know that that's what's really important to me. So again, salespeople, this isn't necessarily a way for management to keep tabs on you. It's a way to help you make you do your job even better with less effort. So, Tim, I'm going to give you the last question on this before we wrap up with Chad.
Ooh, the last question.
But make
I
it a
guess I
make it a
better make it
gooder.
a,
Make it a
yep.
gooder. Yeah.
So what do you see, Chad, as the best way to bring sales and marketing together to bring credibility within the organization itself? So
Yeah.
this is an internal question that has huge benefits externally, obviously.
Well, that is a gooder.
Yeah, that's a great one. Well, I think it goes back to getting in a room together. It's to gain a true understanding between the departments about, you know, what is the strategic approach going to be. Like we both believe this. So this is what we're seeing out in field. Tim, I think you mentioned that earlier. Is like, okay, what's actually happening at field level? And then we need to bring a marketing person either out on calls with us, or we're bringing that information back in for that 360 feedback loop. So we have, consistent meeting set where we're reevaluating the messaging. We're working together towards driving towards the same goals. And those goals should be the same for sales and marketing leadership. That's the other thing, is when you have, yeah, you guys are been
Yeah.
there when you're like, oh, this is a great meeting, Chad. Unfortunately, all my KPIs are completely contrary to yours. So
Yeah,
now we've got this loggerheads constantly, and I see this all the time too. And operations of sales is the obvious example, but I see this in marketing too. So it's like, okay, so let's make sure our goals are aligned. We've got the right strategy, and then we have that feedback loop where we're working together. So, and I think when you do that, and again, your intent's good. You're all pushing the same direction. You all want the same things. Then you get that innate cooperation and collaboration where it's like, okay, no, we're really excited to work together. We're going to solve challenges when they come, and we're going to celebrate successes when we have wins.
excellent. Thank you very much. I think you amplified that one just
Oh
perfectly.
Oh,
no.
he's finishing on with a dad
Ah,
statement. I like it.
Tim, go to your room. Oh wait, you're in
I
your room.
am.
You're in your room. Yeah. So what's interesting is I feel what's and I'm saying this sincerely, I've always known that sales and marketing need to work together, and I always, kind of understood that technology could help that. But
Mhm.
I will sincerely say that I don't know that I fully appreciate it until we've had this whole interaction of how
Yep.
much a good CRM solution can help, make that happen. So, any final thoughts or comments from you, Tim, and then we'll let Chad have this as our guest. We'll let him have the final word.
Sure. I think I would just add and echo a bit to that, Scott, where I continue to learn from, especially that technology side, how people can then get more time back because what's the revenue generating time?
Mhm.
It's time with your customer or preparing to meet with your
Yeah,
customer. If it's doing administration and some of these other things, that's taking away selling time.
100%.
And I think that putting good technical solutions in there with everybody understanding, the limitations and the opportunities presents a great chance for an organization to become more predictably profitable during the future.
Fantastic. All right, Chad, it's all on you to take us home. How, and I know we didn't talk about this, but I'm going to throw it over to you. How would you like to sort of just encapsulate this last 33-ish minutes that we've talked about?
Yeah, I think it's been great talking to you guys, and I love your perspectives because to me, it's like we talked about curiosity before we got on this call and
Yeah.
having that curious nature about and trying to understand what each other's challenges are, the intents, and working together as that collaborative team. And really it's CRM is not it's a tool, to your point,
Hmm.
Tim. It can be unbelievably effective. It could be like bringing a screwdriver to hammer and nails. Like it's just really it's
Yeah.
got to be built correctly. Any tool, but when those tools are really focused on the end user, they're really focused on sales enablement, and you said it earlier. You take the ego out. You take the ego of all these departments out, and you're like, okay, how do we push toward the same goals? Let's get great tools, let's get great people, and then, success is inevitable. And then if you're blessed to have great partners like yourselves that might add some,
Thank you.
some insight and some wisdom and, a sounding board along the way, I think again, like really, the world is your oyster. You are going to exceed the goals that you create.
You know what, Tim?
Well
I know
said.
we were going to take this offline, but but I think maybe we'll have Chad back again. I think he worked out okay.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Good call.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Well,
you, Chad. Thank you, Tim. Everyone be safe, make good decisions, and we'll see you next time on the Sales and Marketing Alliance podcast. Bye, everyone.
thank you guys.
Cheers.